My daughter handed me a note that said, "They've already taken me," just before I heard footsteps upstairs. It felt like a moment frozen in time, a moment that would replay in my mind over and over again. For the rest of my life. I was standing in the kitchen, stirring pasta, the comforting aroma of dinner filling the house, when Sophie came downstairs. She was holding something, her small hands trembling just enough for me to notice. She didn't say a word, but the look in her eyes said it all. Something was wrong. I glanced at her, trying to keep my calm, but the uneasy feeling that had been slowly building inside me intensified. "Sweetie, what's going on?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended, afraid of what might come next. She handed me the note without a word, just the faintest flicker of fear crossing her face. I took it from her hands, unfolding the piece of paper with shaky fingers. The writing was hurried, uneven, like someone had scribbled it in a panic. The message was simple, but it sent a chill through my bones. "They've already taken me." Froze. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even process the words at first. My mind was racing. This had to be some sick joke, a misunderstanding, or a game Sophie had made up. But the look on her face, the sheer terror in her eyes, told me that this wasn't a game. And as much as I wanted to dismiss it as some overactive imagination, deep down I knew it was something real, something that wasn't just in her head. My heart began to pound in my chest. "What do you mean? Who took you, Sophie?" Whispered, my voice barely audible, as if saying the words out loud would somehow make it all real. But she didn't answer. Instead, she simply stared at me, her eyes wide, the fear almost paralyzing. She didn't need to say anything. She didn't have to. I glanced at her again, feeling an inexplicable surge of protectiveness. "Sophie, tell me, please, what's happening?" Before she could speak, I heard it. The sound that made my blood run cold, that made every nerve in my body scream with alarm. The sound of footsteps. Soft, deliberate footsteps coming from upstairs. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. I could hear the sound clearly now. Unmistakably. Footsteps, heavy and slow, echoing through the house. The kind of footsteps you hear when someone is moving with purpose. Not the scurrying of a child running down the hall, but the deliberate pace of something or someone moving deliberately in a way that felt wrong. "Sophie," I said, my voice trembling now. "Stay close to me. Do you hear that?" She nodded, her face pale, her eyes never leaving mine. She didn't need to be told twice. We both stood there, frozen for what felt like an eternity, listening as the footsteps grew louder, closer. My mind raced, trying to come up with a logical explanation, but there was none. My body was reacting faster than my brain. I had to protect Sophie. That's all that mattered now. I grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back door, my own fear choking my voice. "We need to go now," I said, the urgency in my tone more pronounced than I had ever heard it. But before we could make it, I heard something else. A voice, low and guttural like it was coming from behind a wall. It was a whisper, almost inaudible, but it cut through the silence like blade. "Come closer," it said, each word slow, deliberate, and chilling. I froze, a cold sweat breaking out across my forehead. That voice wasn't mine. It wasn't Sophie's. And it wasn't anyone I knew. The voice didn't feel human. It didn't belong in this world. It was something else. Something that didn't belong here. Sophie squeezed my hand tightly, her small fingers digging into my palm. "Mom, who is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, barely a breath. I didn't know how to answer her. I didn't know what to say. "I don't know, sweetheart. But we need to stay calm. We have to get out of here right now." I pulled her toward the back door again, but something held me back. A cold, undeniable force. Like an invisible weight pressing down on my chest, telling me to stop, to look, to listen. See what was really happening. I looked up at the stairs again, my eyes scanning the darkened hallway at the top. The footsteps had stopped. Everything had gone eerily silent. And just as I thought it was over, that maybe it was just my imagination running wild, the air around me seemed to thicken, like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. It wasn't until then that I realized Sophie wasn't scared of just the footsteps. She wasn't just afraid of what we might find upstairs. She was afraid of something else, something I hadn't yet understood. She was afraid of them, whoever they were. I turned back to her, my pulse racing. Sophie, tell me, what is it? Who's coming for us? My voice cracked, desperation creeping in as I tried to piece this all together. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She just shook her head, clutching onto me tighter, as though she couldn't let go. I don't know, Mommy, she whispered. But they've been here before. And they're coming again. I didn't have time to process her words. I didn't have time to fully understand them. But I did understand one thing: whoever or whatever was upstairs wasn't something we could handle alone. I could feel it. The presence in the house. It was like the walls were closing in around us. Like something was pushing us to the edge. The footsteps began again, but this time they weren't coming from the stairs. They were coming from behind us. From the hallway. Closer. Faster. My heart skipped a beat. My legs felt like they would give out under me, but I couldn't stop. Couldn't stand still. I had to keep moving. I had to get Sophie out of there, no matter what it took. As we turned to make our way to the back door, the sound of footsteps echoed again, louder. Now closer. I could feel the cold air biting at my skin, and the feeling of dread was almost suffocating. Something was moving through the house. Something was following us. And then, just as I reached for the door, I saw it. A shadow, moving swiftly across the floor. Didn't have time to scream, to run. I only had time to grab Sophie and yank her toward the door. But it was already too late. The shadow stopped, turned to face us. And just as I felt my breath leave my body, the voice whispered again, this time louder, clearer, and unmistakable. I told you to come closer. And in that moment I realized something. We weren't going to make it out of this. Not unless we faced whatever was coming head-on. Not unless we understood exactly what was happening here. The shadow in front of us seemed to pulse, almost alive, as if it were breathing. I could feel the temperature drop several degrees in an instant, a sudden wave of cold sweeping over me and Sophie. The air grew thick and dense, like it had become too heavy for us to breathe properly. Tried to force myself to speak, to act, but all I could do was hold onto Sophie tighter, pulling her into me as if I could somehow protect her from whatever was about to unfold. The voice, the one that had been whispering from the darkness, spoke again, clearer this time, and I could hear it reverberating in my chest, making the walls seem like they were vibrating. It was a sound unlike anything I had ever heard, not human, not even like anything that belonged in our world. It was otherworldly, primal, and it sent a cold shiver through my entire body. You cannot escape, child. The voice was closer now, right beside us, though the shadow didn't move. It didn't have to. The words seemed to come from everywhere, filling the room with an oppressive force that pressed against my skin. Sophie clung to me, her tiny hands gripping my shirt, her face buried against my side. Felt the weight of her fear, and it was almost more than I could bear. She wasn't crying, but I could feel her tremble in my arms, her body rigid with fear. She knew. She knew what was coming, just like I did. And the realization that I wasn't the only one terrified of whatever this was made my stomach twist. The shadow didn't move, but I could feel its presence like it was suffocating me. It was as though the very air was thick with its malevolence, pressing down on us until it felt like we couldn't breathe, couldn't think. It wasn't just the coldness or the fear that was overwhelming, it was the sense that something ancient and powerful was standing right there, just beyond the veil, waiting to claim us. I wanted to scream, to shout for help, but my voice failed me. My throat was dry and every sound seemed to be swallowed by the dense silence that surrounded us. I had to get out of, or I had to get Sophie out, but every part of me felt paralyzed, as if my body had forgotten how to move. The footsteps started again. Slow, deliberate, and they weren't upstairs anymore. They were coming from the hallway, moving toward us, the sound growing louder with each passing second. They weren't heavy like the first time. No, this was something else entirely. These steps were light, almost calculated, as if whoever or whatever was walking toward us knew exactly what it was doing. And then I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible chuckle. It wasn't just a sound. It was a feeling. A twisted, dark sense of amusement that sent a wave of nausea rushing through me. It was like the shadow was enjoying my fear, feeding off of it, savoring the moment. "Mom!" Sophie whispered, her voice barely a sound, but it felt like a knife slicing through the thick silence. "Who are they? Why are they here?" I didn't know how to answer. I couldn't explain what was happening. I couldn't explain the feeling of dread that was crawling up my spine, the sensation that we were standing on the precipice of something much darker than we could comprehend. But I knew one thing. I had to protect her. No matter what, I had to keep her safe. I forced myself to speak, though my voice shook. "I don't know, sweetheart. But we have to stay close. Whatever happens, don't let go of me. Do you hear me?" She nodded, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear, but she didn't say anything. She didn't need. I could feel her fear, her panic, her desperation to get out of there. And I shared it. Shared every single emotion coursing through her. I could feel the presence in the house grow, like it was filling every corner, every inch of space, closing in on us. The footsteps stopped right outside the kitchen, just beyond the doorway. Felt my body stiffen, my legs like jelly as I struggled to keep my balance. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But the footsteps had stopped, and the silence was almost worse than the sound. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears as I forced myself to move, taking a step back, then another, slowly, carefully. I didn't want to make a sound. I didn't want to draw its attention, but I had no choice. The back door was only a few feet away. If I could get to it, if I could just open the door, I could get Sophie out, get her somewhere safe. And then, just as I reached the door, it opened. I hadn't touched the knob. I hadn't moved. But the door swung open as if it were being pulled by some invisible hand. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The room, once so full of tension, became still, utterly still. I could hear the blood rushing through my veins, the soft, rapid breaths escaping my chest. I turned to look at Sophie, her wide eyes meeting mine, and I knew she could feel it too. We weren't alone. Not anymore. "Leave now," the voice whispered again. It was almost mocking this time, as if it had been waiting for me to move, to make a choice. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. Felt like my body was being pulled in every direction, and yet I was rooted to the spot. The voice had come from inside the house this time, closer, and it sent a rush of cold panic through me. The door was open now, but what lay beyond it wasn't the safety I had imagined. There was something out there waiting. Sophie tugged at my sleeve, her voice breaking through my paralysis. "Mom, what do we do?" Had no answer. Had no plan. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in this house a second longer. I couldn't face whatever this was. But as I looked toward the open door, I knew that no matter where I went, it would follow us. This wasn't just a thing that could be outrun. This wasn't just a shadow. It was something much more. The footsteps outside the door began again. This time they were faster, more frantic, as though the thing, whatever it was, knew we were trying to escape. My heart hammered in my chest as I grabbed Sophie's hand. I had to do something. I had to get her out of there. I pulled her toward the door, but then a figure appeared in the doorway. It wasn't just a shadow. It wasn't just a figment of my imagination. It was tall, dark, and for a split second I saw its eyes. They were glowing, an unnatural, sickly green that sent a rush of terror through my veins. Sophie gasped, clutching my hand even tighter. I turned, ready to pull her away, but the figure stepped forward, blocking the doorway, its presence almost suffocating. And then it spoke. "You can't run from us." I felt my heart drop. The air around me seemed to disappear, as though the world had gone still. And all that was left was this thing, standing between me and the only way out. It was like it had been waiting for this moment, for us to try to leave, to attempt to escape. But we weren't going anywhere. I wasn't sure what to do. My legs were shaking. My mind was racing, trying to find some way out of this, but everything seemed to be closing in. And in that moment I realized that whatever this was, it had already claimed us. And now it was time for us to face it.